We have more than enough evidence to be asking the question, was there intelligence agencies involved in this? Way more than enough evidence to ask that question legitimately. And that friend of Charlie Kirk, though they're not speaking publicly at this point, they stand by that story allegedly that Charlie said this to them directly, that he was scared that Israel might try to kill him if he turned against them. Because we got a lot of questions, but not a lot of answers.
Ian Carroll continues to insist that Israel should be considered a suspect in Charlie Kirk's recent assassination, and in this clip, he considers pieces of information leading him in that direction, and also information about the high-level pressure campaign from Charlie's very pro-Zionist donors toward the end of his life, and inconsistencies in the FBI narrative. Love Ian to death, have a feeling we'll agree on some things and disagree on some things, but let's check it out. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And, I mean, call me crazy, but right now, that story is not adding up at all. We have no credible evidence in my mind that Tyler Robinson ever had this rifle on that campus, even though we have evidence to suggest that they should have evidence of it, that they could have showed us. We have a very confused timeline around the rifle, the outfits, kind of the whole entry, exit, everything. And it's confounded by the video content put out by regular people, which they did not have control over. That's one thing to think about, is what came from organic sources that they didn't control, as far as we know, and what came from the controlled narrative space that could have been used to shape the narrative. Because what they did not control is where you find the things that poke holes in what they tried to control, if it is a cover-up. Then we have this weird old Jewish man clearly trying to help someone escape by his own admission. And then we have all the weird statements about the timeline and the events and the text message, admission of guilt, and the whole boyfriend story that all does not square with the left or the right or just about anybody. And so, when you have one of the largest political people in America assassinated on live TV, your first thought should be, was this a professional assassination? And it's not necessarily. There are definitely crazy kooks that take shots at people.
Yeah, I agree with them on the last part, but there's a lot to break down here. Is there no evidence that Tyler Robinson had this rifle on that campus? Well, I'd ask Ian what it would take for him to believe that. They apparently have DNA from the towel that wrapped the weapon. You have video footage, and I know it's ambiguous. I know people have weighed in on various sides whether he's actually carrying the rifle getting down from that roof or not. But at least it's circumstantial evidence, because it's clear he has something in his hand, and it's grainy footage. I get it if you doubt it, but that's at least circumstantial. Now, do I think that there's absurd things that don't comport to the timeline and the narrative that the FBI is going with? Yeah, I do. And actually, he brought up George Zinn. I think that's the best angle on this thing, because George Zinn, he was said to have told authorities shortly after his arrest that he was trying to create a distraction to help the real shooter. Now, this is crazy, man. This, to me, is the biggest thing worthy of attention. This guy was just released hours later, but slapped with a child porn charge. But he said he was essentially helping the shooter. And, you know, this guy has a weird history. He did threaten to plant bombs at the Salt Lake City Marathon after the Boston Marathon in 2013. So he does have a track record of injecting himself into like violent events like this. But this is still weird. Now, I haven't seen any connection really made between him and Robinson, but I don't know if we have enough to say that Robinson wasn't involved. He wasn't a shooter, whether it's a conspiracy or not. I think the George Zinn story is much more interesting than that there's no information. Plus the text messages that the FBI released, and I know lots of people that are saying they're doctored, but if the FBI wants this guy to walk, they would doctor texts. That's what will happen. If they truly are doctored, that's the sort of thing you can get from subpoena power. You can compare the actual phone that Tyler has with the text they're saying. And if they're falsifying this, this guy's walking. So cast doubt upon what you will if you want to say, like, you know, he was coerced to make those texts or something. But this guy, it's going to just destroy their case if they actually falsified the texts in question.
Usually, the crazy kooks seem to get an arsenal of guns and go into a school and go on a suicide mission, essentially. And, murder a bunch of people and then take their own life. That's what usually seems to happen. Not usually are they planning out a carefully orchestrated hit that involves them getting away clean and then giving a whole text message admission of guilt on regular old texts. Like, right? And so we have more than enough evidence to be asking the question, was there intelligence agencies involved in this? Way more than enough evidence to ask that question legitimately. And when you start asking that question legitimately, that's how you get to the Israel conversation.
So I would even go a step further than Ian on this. It's not that we need any evidence to at least entertain the notion that intelligence services or, the CIA, Mossad, etc., are involved in a high-level political assassination. And the story isn't off limits at all. I think this is, in fact, a story, whether you you buy into Israel's culpability. But it's funny when people say, like, if you deny that Israel was definitely involved with no other possibilities, they say, well, you're covering for Israel. And I've been told that in my comments section, despite, over 200 very anti-Israel videos and things like that. But, the troll response to that is, well, you're just covering for the CIA because everyone knows the CIA did this. But yeah, the main point just being that it is worthy of consideration regardless of what you think. And if you don't think that, I don't know what to say after Ruby Ridge and Waco and the Whitmer, entrapment plot and January 6th and the Kennedy assassination and the Martin Luther King assassination. And, all of those things that we know makes us know that the FBI cannot be trusted, and you're not even going to ask the question, and you're not even going to ask if the state's involved in any way. I think that's wrong. So I guess I'm with Ian on this one. Whether or not you look to Israel, that I agree with.
And the Israel conversation is not one. No one is claiming at this point that anyone knows for sure that it was Israel. Okay? Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Dave Smith, all the right-wing commentators that are involved in this conversation that were involved in Charlie's life and the scandal around the Israel stuff, none of them have at all made the claim that Israel was involved in this in any way. I have made that claim because I'm not involved. This is not my case to solve. I was not involved. I didn't know Charlie. I was not involved in Turning Point. I'm staying out of it. I am a dude on the sidelines looking in. I've purposely not asked Candace for any inside information. I've not tried to dig in to get fucking a bunch of sources and stuff because I don't want to get in. I don't want to get in there. This is not my thing, and I'm not involved.
Well, he's pretty involved in talking about it, but I'm with him. This is an important point that, a lot of the prominent voices that people are just saying are kooky conspiracy theorists about this, like Candace Owens and Dave Smith and George Galloway and Max Blumenthal, they all, are invoking these people when talking about this conspiracy that Israel did it, when all four of the people I just mentioned are saying that they don't have evidence that Israel did it. In Max Blumenthal's article, that's very clear from this sentence right here, by the way. And yet still Netanyahu needs to respond to it. That's at least interesting, right? That none of Charlie Kirk's friends felt compelled or that it was necessary to come out and say, I didn't kill Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was my friend, twice in English to propagandize to Americans. It seems like that's a little bit odd, at the very least, and we should ask questions as to why, probably because of Israel's track record for assassinations in general. That's why, outside of any considerations about Charlie Kirk himself.
And I'm perfectly happy to speculate, because right away I was asking, is an intelligence agency involved? And a very quick assessment of the scene, of the responses, of what happened on the ground, of Charlie's position in American politics. And the first suspect seemed clear to me. I would argue that since day one, we have gotten more and more and more evidence that maybe we should be looking in Israel's direction.
Yeah, what I'll say about what he said earlier, too, about no one's claiming that they have evidence this is Israel or this was Israel. They haven't seen my comments section, by the way. But he's right in terms of the prominence. And again, I don't think this is a story that should just be disregarded or abandoned. Hell, I might have a totally different tune on this in 6 months, because that's what it took, to uncover some of the lunacy about like the COVID regime and what they were calling conspiracies, that this leaked from a Wuhan lab. You were just called a kook. If you said that, you would be called, a conspiracy theorist. If you said that, the Jan 6 thing wasn't exactly an insurrection, or if it was the most unarmed insurrection that ever existed, where, a sacred lectern was moved from the Capitol, and the only death in it was a death by Capitol Hill police against Ashley Babbitt. That's not exactly an insurrection the way they sold it. Things like this, with more information that comes out over time, we learn more. Same with the Kennedy assassination and Oswald's connections with the CIA, and the fact that the FBI was wiretapping Martin Luther King, and by the way, trying to convince him to commit suicide. So with more information, we get more of a judgment power over what exactly transpired. Whether or not we look at Israel's direction, fair enough.
But just a quick primer on why maybe looking in Israel's direction would be appropriate. They have an entire Wikipedia page dedicated to the list of Israeli assassinations. And the reason why they have that, broken down by decade, is because Israel is the world's foremost assassinator. They're the best at it. They do it the most. And they've done it a whole bunch of times just in the last year. One of those was like hundreds of people being assassinated using pagers, with an operation that spanned like a decade and more. I think I'm exaggerating a little bit, but right? Like the Israeli intelligence services are exceptionally good at assassinations. Okay. So, in light of that.
Yeah, before we go into that, this is a good point that I bring up a lot. I pointed to that same Wikipedia page with thousands of examples of Israeli atrocities, of targeted political assassinations and assassinations in general. But by the way, according to the mainstream media, that's not terrorism. That's not terrorism when Israel does it. You know what is terrorism? When Iran does it. When Iran does this, they say it's terrorism. And guess how many examples there are of Iran doing this compared to Israel? It's like a few dozen in Iran's history. It's something like 26, I think I counted it earlier, compared to thousands on Israel's side. And they say this side is terrorism, but when Israel or the United States does it, that's just defending freedom. That's defending democracy. That's Israel having a right to defend itself. So if that tells you anything, it tells you that people would have reason to suspect Israel's intelligence services, or Israel in general, and the United States, by the way, for potential culpability in a high-profile political assassination, regardless of any other factors.
I put all those things out there.
Yeah.
How did these guys not know this was taking place?
So I've been in Israel.
This is Charlie Kirk speaking right after October 7th, within 1 week of October 7th, on the PBD podcast about what happened on October 7th.
Many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still have the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that is an IDF soldier. Right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands.
Whoa. We're going to cut that right there. Let's not talk about, the entire nation of Israel protesting against Benjamin Netanyahu. Charlie, you're supposed to be Benjamin Netanyahu's favorite friend, okay? Just to be clear. That's a little spicy to say, Charlie.
Yeah, it's helpful to know, though, after that, in context, he did double down on pro-Israel propaganda just 2 days later. So that was spicy. That does raise eyebrows. That's not something that Zionists would want to hear, by the way. And he was right about that. There's a big political scandal playing out in Israel over Netanyahu's rigging of elections, using Qatar to do that, corruption and fraud charges that is still on the table today. They've just been kind of delayed as Netanyahu consummates a genocide in Gaza and attacks something like 7 of his neighbors, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Qatar, Yemen, etc., since October 7th. But 2 days after Kirk made that statement, he did tweet this. Just in context, it's worth talking about. He doubled down on Israel's right to defend itself, backed the propaganda, whatever Israel wanted to do in Gaza. Israel has the right to kill every last Hamas terrorist. Asking questions does not make you anti-Israel. That is something that he maintained. But he was repeating Zionist and Hasbara propaganda just right after this. And this interview was literally 5 days after on PDB, October 7th. So it wasn't that recent. Just wanted to put that into context because for 22 months after that, he repeated a lot of the pro-Israel lies that we do hear about Gaza.
Explaining to do, a lot of decoupling to do, because Jewish donors have been the number one funding mechanism of radical, open border, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies, cultural institutions, and nonprofits. This is a beast created by secular Jews. And now it's coming for Jews, and they're like, what on earth happened? And it's not just the colleges. It's the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it. It's like,
that is a pretty based take. That's a topic that, though I have researched and seen evidence of, it's very hard to explain. It's very convoluted. It's very technical, and it's very easy to come across as though you're trying to say that all Jewish people are evil, because it's not. It's a very nuanced criticism of whatever the hell is happening in America right now, and I've avoided it. I've intentionally avoided that topic because it is such a minefield and it's so anti-Semitic. And Charlie just waded right in because he knows he's super smart and he's very informed. And he leveled some great criticism about it, right?
Yeah, I agree with Ian. This is actually a very base take, but it doesn't say what you want it to say if you're just pointing to Israel. He's talking about secular Jewish donors in the United States. In no way did he blame Israel for funding those things. And he makes it a point to say secular Jews, meaning that he doesn't consider religious Jews, especially right-wing Jews, potentially in Israel's government. Whatever you think about their religious adherence, many of the members of Netanyahu's cabinet and Netanyahu himself proclaim to be religious Jews and not secular. So he's not pinning the blame on Israel here. It is a base take. Certainly so if you're in a conservative organization, and that's not something many people that are Zionists in the U.S. would want you to say, certainly so. But he doesn't even push any blame on Israel itself there. Just wanted to note that too.
He was saying that Jeffrey Epstein worked for Israel.
that Epstein, with his little friend Ghislaine and Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, who was obviously a spy of the Israeli intelligence agencies, that there was something else going on here. Epstein was not some sort of whiz-kid hedge fund manager. Epstein was playing a part. Epstein was a LARPer. Epstein was cast for a specific role, and he played it really well. The sweatpants and the Harvard jacket, art and above the... If you actually go into finance and markets, and you can try easy, not hard. And this is no longer just speculation. First of all, the evidence that shows that Epstein was a creation of either Mossad, Israeli intelligence, American intelligence, Saudi intelligence, or maybe he was just a hired gun. Maybe he was just the guy that countries would go to.
Okay. All right. Let's go, Charlie.
All right, on that, I think that, that's interesting for sure. Again, not something that Zionists or pro-Israel forces would want him to say. But again, it's worth clarifying, or at least pointing to the fact that he lists several options. He doesn't come out as strongly as, say, Tucker Carlson, when Tucker Carlson said, well, the country he probably was working for was Israel. And it's not anti-Semitic to say that, by the way. That's what Tucker Carlson said at his Turning Point event. He's listing like 4 choices: American intelligence, Israeli intelligence, Saudi intelligence there. He's putting on the table multiple options, not generally pointing in that direction. Is that, different than Ben Shapiro, never mentioning that possibility? Yeah, that's different. But it's not just asserting that he was working for Mossad. Just wanted to be fair about that, too.
But he also was saying this kind of stuff on the TPUSA stage.
Do you think there's any intel community involvement in this?
I wouldn't be surprised one bit. I am convinced, based on my own sources and my own reporting on this story, he wasn't one of ours.
So he was an American, which leads basically three options: MI6, Saudi, or Mossad.
Yep.
Which one would you choose?
I guess Mossad, given his connection to Ghislaine Maxwell.
And
Listen to them clap for that. This is young conservatives. This is a different breed than your father's Zionist Fox News watching boomers. And that's not that is a generality. I'm not accusing all people that are of that age of that. I have to say this and make this disclaimer every time, by the way, because someone just points out the exception. But man, it's interesting for this to even be on the table of a Turning Point USA event, at the same event that Dave Smith hammered Josh Hammer, pardon the pun, in a debate on Israel, and Tucker Carlson said very incendiary things toward the Israeli influence in the U.S. government.
the crowd cheers. Because the whole crowd is based. Because TPUSA is made up of young people, young conservatives that get it, that have a diverse range of opinions, but they're all pretty based, right? And they know what's going on. And they've just been waiting for these guys to finally crack the door open a little bit.
Totally agree.
And then there is also this interview that is now infamous.
And so I think it's a hyper paranoid, like we're just going to try to, we're going to just stamp out everything type of practice. But it goes to the point where if, for example, if I have less ability sometimes online to criticize the Israeli government about backlash than actual Israelis do. And that's really, really weird.
That is pretty weird, Charlie. That is very weird. And a month ago, where I had made a video criticizing Charlie Kirk for not debating Nick Fuentes, and Harrison tweeted in response, I'm not going to name names, but I was told by someone close to Charlie Kirk that Charlie thinks Israel will kill him if he turns against them. And Harrison is a damn good reporter. You know, you can play the InfoWars smear game all you want. Harrison is a damn good reporter. And Harrison is a man of high integrity that I know personally and whose reporting speaks for itself. And Harrison does not mess around. Harrison is a real dude. And I 100% trust his integrity. I trust his integrity more than just about anyone else on X. Personally, no.
And what this is referring to is Harrison Smith, who now works at InfoWars, made a tweet back in I believe August or July, I think it was August, about how an unnamed source told Charlie Kirk, a friend of Charlie Kirk, that was the unnamed source, that Charlie Kirk was afraid that Israel would kill him. And that started this conversation even before Charlie Kirk's death to some extent. Of course, after he was assassinated, that blew up. But, you know, several corroborating sources show this high-level pressure campaign against him from his donors, etc. Whether or not you believe that he was afraid for his life, as far as I've seen, no one else has said that other than Harrison Smith and his source. But at the same time, some of the other particulars do seem to align with this pressure campaign he was feeling from Netanyahu and his donors.
Him as a father and as a friend. And Harrison has stood by this statement that this was told to him by a direct close friend of Charlie Kirk. And that friend of Charlie Kirk, though they're not speaking publicly at this point, they stand by that story allegedly that Charlie said this to them directly, that he was scared that Israel might try to kill him if he turned against them. That tweet from a month ago has now been corroborated by like 4 sources maybe. It's hard to say exactly which sources are saying what because the gray zone is up to like 5 sources.
Okay, the gray zone story doesn't corroborate that he felt like he was going to be killed by Israel. It just doesn't. That's not true. The gray zone article deals with talking about the pressure campaign he was facing, the fact that he grew not to trust Netanyahu, the fact that he was frustrated by Netanyahu's influence over the Trump cabinet, the fact that he was frightened about the backlash of his donors, but in no part does this essay and people corroborating details in Max's essay corroborate that he thought that Israel would kill him. It just doesn't. I'm sorry to say that. I love Ian, but I don't think it's right to say that about this. As far as I've seen, Harrison Smith's source is the only one claiming that he was afraid that Israel would kill him. Just wanted to be clear there, but that is true.
On this article that they put out that is now infamous, September 12th, Charlie Kirk refused Netanyahu funding offer of $150 million and was frightened by pro-Israel forces before death, friends reveal. He also reveals in this article that Donald Trump is allegedly scared. According to Kirk's longtime friend, Kirk's resentment of Netanyahu and the Israel lobby was spreading within Trump's inner circle. In fact, they said the president himself was terrified of Netanyahu's wrath and feared the consequences of defying him. That's an enormous revelation.
Yeah, it is, but it doesn't say that he feared that Israel would kill him. It's different when you say you feared the consequences and you thought Israel would kill you, which only one source is saying that. I'm just saying, you can make the jump if you want, but it's not a corroboration of saying for sure he was afraid Israel would kill him to say he was frightened about the consequences of the pressures from Netanyahu and his donors. Just saying.
And currently, this might be the most important thing to dig into in America. Therefore, a few hours after hearing of Kirk's death, I very gingerly raised these possibilities with someone well situated in conservative circles who personally knew Kirk and was shocked by his response. He unequivocally told me that everyone in Kirk's circle, even including important Trump administration officials, suspected that Israel had probably killed the young conservative leader. While such beliefs might not necessarily be correct, I was astonished that they were apparently so widespread without even a hint of those notions reported anywhere in the mainstream or conservative media. Ron Unz is alleging that many people apparently in Kirk's circle and around Trump immediately thought that Israel might be to blame as well. Okay?
Yeah, and I'll defend Max's right to print that. This was in the political zeitgeist, very soon after this happened. A lot of people have said, oh, Max Blumenthal is just trying to raise the idea that Israel killed Charlie Kirk, but he's being very responsible in this article, making the story about that was a suggestion by many people of prominence, including Ian Carroll, shortly after it happened, with Dave Smith weighing in on that, asking Ian what evidence he has, etc. So Max was right, I think, to cover this story this way, certainly so. And some of the hostility levied toward him over that is just flat out wrong. Max is a superb journalist and has covered this perfectly as far as I see it. Like I always say, this is a story, whether or not you think Israel was culpable. It just is. And to bury it and not talk about it whatsoever, I think would be just as wrong as thinking that it had to be Israel no matter what, no other scenario is plausible, up to and including the CIA doing it. That's equally wrong than saying that this isn't a story, to me.
Maybe Ron Unz is a total liar. If you don't know who Ron Unz is, he's a businessman. Oh, come on. He's got a Wikipedia page. Oh, it's because Charlie Kirk is still in there. This is Ron Unz. He's a tech entrepreneur, conservative political activist, writer, and publisher. I'm not familiar with his work, really, but he's been around a long time. He's run in politics a number of times. He's obviously been criticized by the Anti-Defamation League for hosting racist and anti-Semitic content on Unz Review because free speech is anti-Semitic and racist. But who knows?
It always is. I mean, they're trying to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. That's what they're trying to write into law and use the iron fist of government to crack down on dissidents of Israel, with Pam Bondi saying, hey, hate speech is in a different category than free speech, and it's not protected by the First Amendment. They want to weaponize the censorship regime against dissidents of Israel. That part is true no matter what you think.
Oh, did I just share that article without letting you see it? This is Ron Unz. This is him. And this is on the Unz Review. This is an article written by Ron Unz himself, where he says he raised the possibility with some well-situated people And he unequivocally told me that everyone in Kirk's circle, even including important Trump administration officials, suspected that Israel had probably killed the young conservative leader.
Okay, this I haven't seen, so I have to give Ian credit for this, digging this up. I haven't seen this yet. This would corroborate the Harrison Smith narrative about him being afraid that Israel would kill him. You know, there's unnamed sources again. I don't know much about Unz, but this is corroborating it. I don't know about Unz's reputation as a journalist. If you have more information and you trust this, let me know in the comments down below.
Though those beliefs might not necessarily be correct, it was astonishing to know that they were thinking it. Because everyone's thinking it. Because Turning Point was built by Zionist money. Turning Point was built by the Israeli donors, by the donor class, right? And I'll do more reporting on that in the days to come, on the founding and the donors and who exactly we're talking about. We'll do more reporting on the rest of this Israel side of this conversation probably tomorrow. But all the people that are losing their minds over people suggesting that maybe we should look at Israel and make sure that they're not anywhere in this picture, all of those people don't seem to have any context on how intelligence agencies work and on how assassinations work, okay? When an intelligence agency plans an assassination, they plan it out to have a patsy. They plan it so that it will have a story that will be believable, so that you won't look too closely, so that they won't get found out. That's how it is done. And so when you have a mainstream, high-level assassination, that should be one of your first questions. Like when Kennedy got shot, you would have been retarded to assume that it was a lone gunman before an extensive investigation was completed. And that is a great example of a story of an event where they tried to feed you a lone gunman.
Yeah, I agree with him on this, but I think it would have been equally retarded to say, well, this was absolutely Swahili no matter what. And Swahili didn't have the connection to America that Israel did, and Israel was, involved in stealing nuclear weapons at that time, and Kennedy was talking about the fact that, the AZC, the American Zionist Council, should register as a foreign lobby. But it would have been equally retarded to just leap to conclusions that you don't know. And what he said about a patsy, well, that's not what Tyler's legal defense is even claiming right now, that he's a patsy. Tyler Robinson isn't claiming that he was set up for this at all. No one close to him has said that. His defense attorneys haven't said that as far as anything I've seen. And a lot of people point to Oswald and say, hey, he was a patsy. He was a patsy because he said so. He said, I'm not the shooter. I didn't shoot Kennedy. And that's what Oswald did say shortly after they say, he shot Kennedy. So in one context, these people that pointed to that said, he was a patsy. You know why? He said so. But in this case, some people are still saying, well, he's a patsy because he didn't say so. And they're trying to set him up. He's under pressure. Well, he's under the pressure of facing first-degree murder charges by the feds with the death penalty as the punishment here, too. So he's being threatened by the state, whether or not some outside force is threatening it. I haven't heard any evidence that he's saying that that is the story, that he was set up. Maybe they will go with that at trial. But there's no evidence that he's a patsy. He's probably involved in this, whether or not you think he was tied to Israel or part of a conspiracy involving George Zinn or someone else or his roommate. Whatever other theories or scenarios that you concoct about this, he is saying, he's not saying he's a patsy in this case.
Just like so many other shootings, like Thomas Matthew Crooks. Hello. And so if you are so quick to jump to the conclusion that this was a lone gunman after all those inconsistencies, and after apparently, we're at 3 reportings now of, unnamed sources saying the same thing from different directions, all at different times. One of them was a month ago. I mean, the Gray Zone's reporting was being developed over the last several months, not just since this shooting.
But the Gray Zone doesn't say that he thought Israel would kill him. He's right about the Unz report, which I hadn't seen. I'm glad that he brought that to my knowledge. But it's just the Harrison Smith and the Unz thing right now, as far as I know. Maybe there's more people of repute with people close to Charlie that I don't know. But again, the Gray Zone doesn't purport that. It says he was frightened. about the ramifications of all this and Netanyahu's influence. It doesn't say he thought Israel would kill him in the gray zone piece.
That is not so crazy to suggest, right? So we're going to save the super chats from this one, and we're going to read them all in the next one. We're going to save it all. Candace's show is about to start. Before you leave, like the video, subscribe to my channel if you're new here. I really appreciate you hanging out. Hopefully you learned some things. Hopefully you thought of some questions. Hopefully you don't agree with everything that I said and you thought for yourself and came to your own conclusions, because I'm just a dude trying to figure it out too. And I'm just sharing what I find with all y'all. So head on over to Candace's stream. She's probably about to drop some bombshells. I'll be over there watching it with you. And we will be doing much more of these live streams in the near future. Subscribe to my Twitch if you wanted to be doing the research live streams with us. We just started a Twitch channel. And you know what? I'm probably just going to produce like a real official YouTube video about this that has it all laid out, because that's what it needs. Because we got a lot of questions, but not a lot of answers.
Yeah, I got to agree with him on that. And I really like Ian's attitude in covering this and what he said at the end. That's amazing. Like, if you didn't come to the same conclusions, fair enough. Thanks for at least listening to me. Like and subscribe. You're still in this with me. And that's my attitude too. I think we could all use that kind of humility. Like, we could be wrong. We could be right. We're just sifting through what we think is relevant on the way to a narrative that makes the most sense and is backed by the most actual facts. So, despite some disagreements here, fair enough. This is, I guess, the most extensive case I've seen laid out to point in that direction. But at the same point, there's no through line. I haven't seen anyone connect Israel to Tyler. If you believe Tyler Robinson is the shooter, many people don't. Many people do, or at least a shooter. But I haven't seen, the same people carrying this narrative and so rigid in it, so convinced by it, so compelled by it, to the point that they're just willing to say Mossad did this no matter what. I haven't seen those people connect this to any shooter whatsoever. No money trail, no communications with the IDF or intelligence services. And you might say, well, we may never get that. Well, if we don't get that, what can you go off to make that assertion other than your own, desired conclusion? This is where you want it to go. And I can't blame you. I would like to be hostile to Israel in another way too, if possible. I'd hate to do that over the fresh corpse of a young conservative influencer who, despite what you thought about him, did fight for free speech, kind of as the cornerstone of his entire thing. I haven't been reluctant to criticize Israel, but I don't think it's carrying water for Israel to doubt this connection unless we have more tangible information. And for all I know, the CIA could be involved in this. I do doubt this federal narrative about this shooting. I think that some of the narratives regarding, the assembly and disassembly of the gun were preposterous at first that they gave us. And, some things regarding George Zinn just being released right away, that seems really odd to me despite his past. So I think there's all sorts of holes in the federal narrative. But to say that makes you have to default to Israel did it is weird to me. Like, there's no through line. There's no concrete connection that people have sold me convincingly showing that. And maybe there will be. Again, maybe I'll be talking about this differently in a month's time. I was talking about the COVID regime differently to some extent in a month's time. But at least with Kennedy, man, there was the CIA connection to Oswald, the surveillance. We knew about that even before the JFK files. More was divulged about that later. We know about the fact that the CIA was pissed at Kennedy, or at least the architect of it was. Alan Dulles was dismissed by JFK over the Bay of Pigs debacle, and then they put that guy at the head of the Warren Commission. You had at least those sorts of things to go on in regard to the CIA action, but I haven't seen people point in that direction when it comes to Israel. So I'm with Max Blumenthal and Dave Smith and Candace Owens and George Galloway, all of which have talked about this. They don't believe this is a story where you should just slam the door, but say, openly that they don't have any reason to believe Israel did it. That's where I'm at too. Prove me wrong. Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Ian too. Really appreciate him and his work regardless of any disagreements. And please consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. You can help support the channel, and in return, I will thank you profusely and also give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on my channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.